You're listening to Be Radiant Radio. You are made of light and you are made to shine. Positive, uplifting, and helpful. Welcome to the show where you'll get informational and inspirational ideas on how to unleash your potential, get what you want in life, and shine like you're meant to.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Angela Loeb. Thanks for tuning in for today's program. I'm joined by a special guest, Shelley Pernot of True North Coaching and Development. Shelley's an expert on mindfulness, and she's the author of the book Running on Empty, The Irreverent Guru's Guide to Filling Up with Mindfulness. What a great title. She joins me today to talk about the concept from her book, specifically in Chapter 2, called The Life Intention Statement. She says it's the one little sentence that makes a big difference. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Shelley's background, which includes working her way up through the corporate ranks, earning an MBA from a top European school, and succeeding in a well-paying job in risk management in London. Having ticked all the boxes but feeling uninspired, in 2011, she took a life-changing sabbatical that introduced her to the power of mindfulness. And she's been on the show a couple of times when we've talked about mindfulness. And when she got back to work after taking that sabbatical, at the time she was employed by the energy firm BP, she was inspired to follow her passion and help the company recover from the Deepwater Horizon incident and became global capability management for the leadership development team. And this passion she had about mindfulness, she brings that into the practices that she does with the mainstream and helping others to live and lead authentically. So she does both coaching individually and working in businesses. She left BP in 2015 to start her own coaching and training firm, True North Coaching and Development, and she's a recognized expert on mindfulness in the workplace and has collaborated with the University of Texas at Austin and NYU to bring mindfulness programs for busy professionals. And of course, as I've already mentioned, she's also the author of Running on Empty. So, hi, Shelley. Welcome to the program. I'm excited to have you back.
Hi, Angela. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, so we have a lot to cover, and you know how we've done this before, so 30 minutes, bam, it goes by just like that.
Yeah,
so I'm going to just go into it with the first question. And, of course,
okay.
I'm very intrigued. We've talked about mindfulness before, but this time we're talking about something called the Life Intention Statement. And I'd like to really kind of get a sense of what is that?
Sure. Yeah. So, and it's related to mindfulness, and I know that we're probably going to link back to that at some point. But the way I describe a life intention statement is it's one statement that sums up the essence of who you are and why you're here on this earth. So it's powerful. All that in one sentence.
Other than being powerful, I mean, why do you think that it's important to have a life intention a statement like that?
Yeah, you know, that's a really interesting question. When I teach the workshop that I do at the University of Texas Professional Education Center, we do an exercise around life intention statements quite early on in the day. And the way that I introduce this topic, I don't know if you remember those commercials that Monster.com had a while back. It was a bunch of kids, and they were saying things like, when I grow up, I want to be underappreciated. When I grow up, I want to claw my way up to middle management. Yeah, I mean, it was quite a popular ad. And so the way that I introduce this topic when I teach it is I actually play that video first, and then we have a discussion about it. And it's interesting because I guess it was probably about 6 or 8 months ago. I was running the course, and I played the video, and there was one student in the audience who had a really emotional reaction to that particular clip, and she basically was saying, you know, that's it. That this is exactly how I feel. You know, I don't know how I wound up in the job that I'm in, doing what I'm doing, but I can tell you that this isn't what I wanted for my life. You know, how did I get here? What the hell happened? And the whole audience, everyone kind of, because it's one of those moments where everyone just kind of stops and we looked over. We're all nodding our heads because I think we've all experienced those moments in life where you sit and you think to yourself, how the hell did I wind up here? This wasn't what I intended. Well, then the question is, what was what you intended? What were you intending for your life? And what's interesting about this exercise that I've done with folks is it starts to illustrate for a lot of people just how far we've allowed ourselves to drift, so to speak. It's often that $64,000 question. And it often will expose that where we're at, we got there quite unconsciously. So it's interesting. I think back to that student. I think back to her reaction, and then I think about myself and the number of times I experienced that. Because I've been just as stuck. When I think about how I got to where I am now, I actually started my career as an accountant. I don't know if you knew that.
I read the chapter 2 book. I read your chapter 2, so I know that you started off as an accountant. And I think we talked about this before. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I fell into not an accountant, Shelley. You were not an accountant.
No, I'm so not. But it's one of those situations where growing up, you're influenced by a lot of people. You take on a lot of what I call limited beliefs, from other people, from society, and so you're influenced. And I kind of got to this point where I was thinking, okay, it's either accounting or engineering. And so I picked accounting because I really didn't like math, and engineering had too much math in it.
It's funny because accounting is math too.
So does accounting,
right?
It's
not high math; it's not advanced math.
Exactly. So I ended up as a CPA actually, and that's how I started my career. And it was a case of square peg round hole from day one. And it wasn't that I didn't do well. I did well in the field. I ended up getting a really well-paid job, managed to make my way to London. Things were working in a lot of aspects of my life. And I was ticking all the boxes, career tick, qualifications tick, house tick, all from a material point of view, I had all the things that somebody could want. And my biggest dilemma at the time was, which Mercedes convertible should I buy?
Nice.
And nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But what I couldn't reconcile that with was the fact that I was increasingly feeling more and more miserable. And unfulfilled and uninspired. And I just knew that there was something else for me. But I didn't know what that was because I never really allowed myself to explore it before. I had just told myself this is the path that you're on and you just stick with that path. And, it took, because I started practicing accounting in 2000, it took until 2012, actually, for me to make a shift and move into leadership development. And so I drifted for a long time. I kind of drifted. And, over the years, I was numbing myself out with food, with alcohol, and that's what prompted me to take that sabbatical. And so, it was quite a bumpy and a rocky road for me. And hence, back to the question around why is having a life intention statement so important? It ultimately gives direction to an individual because, to the extent that you don't have it, what the hell am I doing here?
No, I agree. Later. And, it's funny. Let's go back and talk a little bit about accountants. Now, there's nothing wrong with being an accountant, by the way. And I remember one time, because I used to be a recruiter, I remember interviewing someone who was an accountant, and they told me about, because I asked them, I tried to get them to talk about what was, that thing about them that kind of put them in the zone, that made them really enjoy their work, that made them just kind of light up and lose track of time. And she said it was reconciliation. It's actually finding that last penny, the puzzle of solving that. Was what really got her going. And she was all lit up when she was talking about it, too. And I was like, okay, so go into the interview and talk about this. So even though that wouldn't be my thing, it was her thing.
Absolutely.
And so that lit her up. So I was just like, I'm thinking everybody has something, even accountants, right? So
absolutely,
there's something
absolutely.
about it.
And I'm very gracious toward accountants in my books.
Just like I used to wait tables, and I'm always a good tipper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a place for everybody. The trick is figuring out what it is, for you, and not being afraid to claim it. I think that quite often we're nervous to really think about what we really want. As kids we think about it. As kids we talk about what we want to be when we grow up. And then we get older, and, there's life and there's realities, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to take this path. And, sometimes we forget some of those things we thought about when we were children. When I was a child, I actually wanted to be a psychologist.
Now, that seems right on
path for you. I'm coming more back towards that now.
Yes. I see that now, yeah. So do you have a life intentions? I mean, what is a life intention statement? Is it just like a mission statement? Is it phrased in a special kind of way? Maybe you can share with us what yours is to give us a sense of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So mine is to use my skill of connection to build a fulfilling business where I help others realize their true self.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and there is definitely a trick to how you write it, and in fact, let's go ahead and talk about that actually for a little bit. So there's always and I want to preface this by I know that I've given you a link for your readers or your listeners to Chapter 2 of the book, and I would highly encourage anyone who's listening to this to actually click on that link, download Chapter 2, and follow it along. Because while there's only 3 questions I ask people to consider, there's some activities in that chapter that will help to prime people to get them to think a little bit more beyond the ordinary, so to speak. Because I think we often quite limit ourselves, like I was talking about before, when it comes to this kind of thing. I'm an adult, I need to think about adult things and, put anything that's remotely childish out of my mind. And there's a visualization exercise, and it's actually on my website where folks can listen to that and kind of helps to put people in the right mindset, I think, to answer some of these questions. So let's see. So the first thing that I have people think about when they're writing a life intention statement is what are my unique gifts?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So for me, in my particular situation, it was the gift of connection. There's a lot of things that I think I'm good at, but when I think about what really defines me, what really makes me special and what makes me unique is the fact that I get to use my skill at connection and do that in a number of different ways, but it's something I feel like I'm pretty good at. I love speaking with people. I love writing. I love doing public speaking and talking. I love networking. So for me, it's that skill of connection. So that was what came up for me.
It's connecting from you to the person, or is it connecting others together for you? Is it the connection of you to the person?
Yeah, so for me, it's me connecting with other people. I feel like that's a gift that I have, and one of the things that led me, to write my book, is the fact that it would enable me to connect with readers in a certain way. So that gift of connection, I think, is, sometimes we take these things for granted, but in my case, that's what came up for me. So the second thing that I have people think about is what is one thing that you want to experience in your lifetime? So for me, it was building a fulfilling business. That's one thing that I wanted to experience in my lifetime. There's a number of things I wanted to do, but when I really thought about it, when I really, really, really thought about it, that's what came up for me. I want to have that experience of being able to build a business. Now, for someone else, it could be something completely else. Maybe a business wouldn't even come into it, but that's what came up for me. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing that I have people think about is, what do you want out of life? Personally, emotionally. What's the one thing that you want most out of life? And for me, it was to help others realize their true potential or their true self. Again, could have been many, many, many things, but when I really sat down and thought about it, that's what came up. So this whole exercise, by the way, these 3 questions that I'm sharing with you are in Chapter 2, as well as a number of other exercises prior to that. And like I said before, I highly recommend that your listeners go through the entire chapter and find a quiet time to do this. Where you're away from the noise for a little bit, and you get the chance to really kind of zone in with yourself and think about what you really want. Because quite often in life we focus on what we don't want.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want any more money problems. I don't want to have to deal with my mother-in-law. I don't want.
I think the deal is, though, Shelley, is that we can recognize what we don't want because we have a lot of what we don't want going on, and so. And some of us want too many things, or we are not clear what we want. So what do you tell the person that's, well, Shelley, I think a lot of gifts, and because one time I remember helping someone, and she said, I know what my thing is. I know what my purpose in life is to help others. And I went, well, a lot of people feel that way. So what do you do to help others, and how do you who are the others, and what kind of help do you want to provide? And so she's like, I see what you mean. So it's kind of narrowing it down more, right? I mean, how do you suggest people narrow it down like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, actually. I think by answering these 3 questions, it does actually help to narrow it down, to be honest, because, help others is quite general, if I think about that. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to how are you going to help people? What skill or what quality of yourself are you going to actually use to do that? And by doing so, what are you going to experience in doing that? And I do think that helps to tease some of that out. But I agree, if it's too general, then it's a little bit difficult to use the life intention statement and make it meaningful, because the life intention statement is basically a honing device, so to speak. It's maybe a way to think about it is like a lighthouse, a beacon. It kind of hones you in. And when you find yourself going off track, so to speak, then it's that one thing that you can look back to and think, is this really how I want to be spending my time? Is this really what I want to be doing with my life? And helping others, that would be fairly general. But again, I think going through, the questions will help to get that a bit more specific.
Good. Okay. And so what about you? I mean, your life intention statement is pretty clear. And so how have you applied it as a homing beacon in your own life?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting in a number of ways, because when I was thinking about writing a book, for instance, I wasn't sure if I should be doing that. And I remember thinking, is this just going to be like a fun diversion, kind of heading off into the wilderness? Or is this really going to be something that is worth my time? And, when I started to think about it, the book that I wanted to write was Running on Empty, which, is a lot about helping people find fulfillment and find meaning in their life through mindfulness. And so I went back to my life intention statement, and I was looking at it, and it's like, well, okay, use my skill of connection. Okay, so connection also includes writing. And writing is something that I've always been pretty good at. I'd never written a book before, but I thought it was something I was pretty proficient at. And I'm like, okay, so, writing is a way to build connection with people. It's a way to connect with people in a really deep and meaningful way, actually. So I can share stories with them. I can share exercises with them, advice, tips. Because Running on Empty is a self-help book ultimately, but I can speak to the message that I really want to speak to, which is helping others realize their true self. A big theme of the book is my own search for my own true self. And so what I want to help other people is to realize that, number one, it's okay to want to search for your true self, because we're taught not to. But it's messy and it's murky, and it's okay if you stumble and make mistakes. So I realized that by writing the book was a way of doing this, like in a very deep and meaningful way, and it's also a great marketing tool. So it speaks to the building a fulfilling business part of my intention statement.
Yeah.
So it actually gave me the confidence to say, you know what, I'm going to write this book. This is exactly what I'm about, and I'm going to do this. It also helped me in other ways. When it came to, because I came across this concept when I was doing my coaching training in 2014, and when I actually then went to launch True North Coaching and Development, it helped me pick the name of my company. Because when I think about what my life intention statement is, it's to helping others realize their true self, their true north. So hence True North was born.
Yes.
So,
and a life intention statement is all part of that. It's all tied into that.
It's all part
of
that. Yeah. It's all part of that. And it also helped me figure out, what not to do. So an example of that is, I have True North Development, which is my leadership development business, and then I have True North Coaching, which is where I do a lot of life coaching and career change coaching. And when it came to the leadership development side of the business, at one point I was really struggling, because it's like, I'll do any kind of leadership development. If you want a course on planning, I'll do that. If you want a course on strategic thinking, I'll do that. And it's kind of one of those things where you're just going through the motion for the money. And because it pays well, I facilitated leadership for many years for BP, and there's a lot of demand in the corporate world for work like that, and it pays very, very well. And I took a step back and I thought, what do I really want to specialize in? And I don't want to be a jack of all trades. And so I went back to my life intention statement, and it's around things that where I get to help others realize their true self. So anything that has to do with awareness, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, these are the things that I want to teach and bring into corporations. Because these are the
things that not only individuals need, but definitely leaders need it too.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely.
I mean, how to really be authentic as a leader. That's one of the key tenets of my leadership program. And so what does that look like? What does it look like when it means you have to have a difficult conversation? What does it look like in terms of your leadership style? So it's all about, it helped me figure out where to focus, from a business point of view, so I could stay more in tune with my mission and my vision. So it's been super
totally makes
helpful.
sense. It's your true north. It keeps you on your true north too.
Sure.
So
Sure.
Now I know that at the heart of your work is mindfulness. It's kind of the pivot point of everything for you. And so not surprisingly, in your book you mentioned that a life intention statement is a mindfulness practice. So could you explain that connection though? Why is that the case that this life intention statement is connected to mindfulness practice?
Absolutely. So, I mentioned before that I do an exercise around this, when I'm doing my workshop at UT, and that's not a coincidence, because my perspective on this is a mindful life is an intentional life. So it's not about floating around aimlessly and unconsciously. And I honestly think, one of my favorite quotes actually comes from the Cheshire Cat. So if you remember in Alice in Wonderland, Alice is wandering through the wilderness, and she doesn't know where to go, and she's lost, and she's disoriented, and she comes across the Cheshire Cat. And I think he's sitting up in a tree smoking a cigarette or something, if I remember, the children's movie. But the Cheshire Cat says, well, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
That's right.
And that, to me, it's so profound, because that's how so many of us live our lives. And the amazing thing about it, and I'm sure you've probably found this as a coach, Angela, but, I have no shortage of people who come to me and say, I need more work-life balance. I'm just too busy. There's no time for me. And one of the things that I help them get clear on is the life intention statement when I hear that. For me as a coach, it's almost like a red flag that wait a second here. Let's take a step back and get really, really clear on what's important to this person. Because there's a lot of people out there that I think have problems even saying no to things. And this is something that I used to talk a lot about, when I was working at BP, and I used to teach a course on personal effectiveness. But when you know what's important to you, when you say no, you're saying yes to something bigger. And
right.
That is why the life intention statement is so important.
This is so true. I love it. That's really making a lot of sense. And just to repeat this again, I thought it was awesome. A mindful life is an intentional life. And I think you're right. I mean, it's like we can quote you on that. But you're right.
Yeah, you
it's kind of like
quote me on that.
You can put quote Shelley Pernot. So I think though you're right, because you kept saying earlier about drifting. People are drifting, or you were drifting, and so becoming mindful. I think there's a point that has to happen when you've got that clarity, where you can actually get it into a life intention statement and understand your true north. That if you don't sit and be still, be in stillness that mindfulness requires you to be. That's just what mindfulness is, right? It's like being in the moment, being present, and being attuned. So you have to be attuned to yourself and listen to your voice versus all the other ones that keep crowding in.
Absolutely.
The oughta, shoulda, coulda.
And we live in a state of flux where, and we're encouraged to do it. It's a badge of honor to say you're super busy.
I know. It's true.
I mean, that's how our
there's
culture
a great
works.
saying, the old saying, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person.
Yeah. I'll
so just take on more
busy
stuff.
Yeah, particularly in our culture, and so we keep ourselves in that perpetual state where we never have a chance to kind of take a step back and say, but wait a second. Let all that quiet down for a second. What do I really want? And that's what the life intention statement is honing in on. And that's why I've got a number of exercises in that chapter to kind of to prime people, because it's hard to sit down and answer those three questions just right out of the blue. I'm going to take 5 minutes to do that, in between meetings. No, that is not going to work.
How realistic is that, right? Oh, my goodness. Well, and just like that, I mean, it's almost time to go. We have about 3 minutes left, and I want to definitely tell people about how to find you, send them to your website.
Sure.
Thank you so much for sharing the chapter for free for us to look at and read, and those exercises are, and I love your tone, Shelley. You are making a connection in the book. I do feel connected to you, like I hear your voice in the book.
Oh,
so
thank you.
You've done it, so congratulations for that. And so go ahead and give everybody your website. What would be the best, because I know you have a couple of websites. Where do you want to send people to?
Yeah, you can contact me at www.truenorthlifecoach.com. And that's my site where I talk about life coaching and career coaching, and that is also where that link will take your listeners to, where they can download the free copy of Chapter 2. And I'd love to hear from your listeners too, and hear about their life intention statements and what they got out of it. So please reach out to me by all means.
Yeah, that would be fun. I would love to hear it too. All right, well, we've got to run because we are almost out of time. But y'all, thanks for tuning in, and thank you, Shelley, for joining me. And you can check out the resource links. And if you want to join me on next time, I'm going to do another program on March 19, and it'll be another installment of the Career Goals series that I've been doing. Thanks again so much, Shelley, for joining us today. This has been great.
You're so welcome. Always a pleasure, Angela.
All right, everybody. Well, it's time to go. And so one more thing, I want to remind you to keep on shining, like I always say. Keep on shining like you're meant to.